In Fairfield County, something new comes across my desk every day. Crimes are committed, cases are solved, and a community is made safe by the hardworking employees of the Fairfield County Sheriff's Office.
Welcome to This Week with Sheriff Dave Phalen, a weekly program here on LSN Television. We're also carried by a number of the radio affiliates here in Lancaster and beyond. Do appreciate you, the viewers and listeners that join us each and every week. We've got a great program lined up. We're going to have Chief Mike Tussey with the Baltimore Police Department with us. I want to thank the staff and the students here at Fairfield Christian Academy that where this program is actually taped, and our executive producer Kelly Roberts behind the scenes gets the guests together and does a terrific job lining the guests up, the questions, and a lot of things behind the scene. Chief Tussey, glad to have you back.
Good to be back.
Boy, a week flies.
It does.
It really flies. But we had a great program last week and talked a little bit about your career and a host of different things. And you've been the Baltimore chief for 9 years. You have, what, 30-some years in law enforcement?
About 37, I guess.
37
Yeah.
in law enforcement. Wow. That's pretty amazing in and of itself.
Sometimes it amazes me.
And spent a lot of your career with Westerville, and you're with the Lancaster Police Department, the Fairfield County Sheriff's Office, New Lex, and today in Baltimore. Anything in your career that kind of sticks out as kind of one moment that really kind of you'll never forget, either good or bad or indifferent?
I guess two things that come to mind is when I was at Westerville, I was in charge of the accident squad, and we had a young girl who had been killed in a crosswalk incident on our way to school. And it's one of those things that, you as much as they say, oh, you're a tough guy, and just roll off your back, you carry some things with you. But the biggest reason I carry that with me is, again, I remember her when I am working the school zones, when we're doing things to protect the kids that are on their way to school, but also her parents and the strength they had, and how not only the community but their church wrapped around them and got them through that, and what a wonderful family they were to be able to move forward, and everyone in that family has remained very successful today. But I remember that sticks in my head, and interestingly enough, I remember when I was sworn in at the sheriff's office, the chief deputy at the time was Mike Norris, and just an absolutely great guy. And I was called and told to show up, that I'd need to be sworn in. So he introduced me to the then sheriff, and we had to go across the street then to be sworn in. So I walked across the street, got sworn in, came back. I saw the sheriff motion to chief deputy, and he kind of laughed and came back, and I said, well, first day, what am I in trouble for? And he goes, he couldn't remember who you were. So I thought, well, that's a good way to start a career, if they can't remember who you are. So
yeah, we over the course of the year will hire probably 6, 7 deputies, sometime actually more. And the thing that amazes me now is when I look at their date of birth, and it's like 1990s, early 90s, and there's just something about that. Say, wow.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, it amazes me how quickly the time has gone by. And when I first started, I actually was working with some guys that were World War II vets that were coming towards the end of their career. And I remember one in particular said to me, don't blink, because it will be time to retire before you will ever know it. It will just be there. And when I got my time in at Westerville, he was right. I mean, I remember looking back and thinking, it feels like maybe 10 years, but it certainly doesn't feel like all of these years that could have possibly gone by.
Yeah, my dad used to tell me, he said, it's a quick trip to 50 to 80. He said, hang on. And I'm about halfway on that journey, So he had a lot of wisdom when he figured that out. Now let's talk a little bit before we get into some of the things about what we're seeing on the internet, safety and those kind of things. And I think this is kind of an interesting thought. If you could have done one other career other than law enforcement, what might have that been?
I would have taught.
Okay.
I really enjoy that. I enjoy interacting with the kids, and I kind of got into that a little late on, but I really enjoy that. I think that that's something that I could certainly have made a career out of, and I know to this day when I teach, especially in the elementary or junior high, it almost recharges my batteries.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's probably where I would have been.
Yeah, I agree with you. I enjoy that a lot, and it's always rewarding, whether it's an adult class or kids. Now let's talk about, it's back to school, and one of the things that you're kind of an expert in as far as the internet safety. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, every year, especially when school starts, we will start to see an uptick in parents coming in and saying, my child is being bullied. My child was involved with someone sending them an inappropriate photo. My child was on a site that is not appropriate for them to view. And ultimately what it comes down to is education. And, I've had parents come in with 10-year-olds who have, an iPhone 5 that has all the capability in the world to surf, scan, take photos, videos, do whatever. My first question is, why do they have that? And they'll say, well, in case there's an emergency, they can call me. Well, I think a lot of people don't know. Every phone provider has an emergency phone that you program in the numbers that phone will dial. And every phone, whether it's activated or not, will dial 911. So even if you have an old phone, if it's charged, even though it's not on a service provider, you dial 911 and it will go through to the whatever the service would be for that, whether it's the sheriff's office or if you're in Columbus or whatever. So sometimes it's more educating the parent than it is educating the child. Making sure they understand that there are a lot of dangers out there. Even to this day, although the dynamic in investigations has greatly changed. Originally, we were looking at the predators who were going into the chat sites and, pretending to be someone they're not and arranging for meets. Now what we have is the texting back and forth, and unfortunately one of the huge problems that we're dealing with is the sexting, which is the inappropriate taking of photos and disseminating those. And a lot of these kids don't understand, I'm only going to send it to this person. Well, that person then sends it to one more, who sends it to two more, who sends it to three more. Pretty soon it's disseminated through an entire school community or maybe an entire community. And for the rest of their life, they have to be concerned.
Can't get it back.
No,
Can't get it back.
It's there forever. And when is it going to pop up again?
So what does the law say about the sexting? I mean, when does it become a violation?
Basically, and this is another thing that sometimes I have a difficulty explaining to the parents. If you have someone who is under the age of 18 and a photo is taken of that person and you disseminate it, that's a felony. Well, here's where this gets a little complicated for people to understand. If the person taking that photo is the person depicted in the photo and they are underage, they have still committed a felony. So that creates an issue. The dissemination creates an issue. If a person takes a photo of themselves, let's say we have a 15-year-old takes a photo, and they send it to a 17-year-old, and that 17-year-old then sends it to any other person, they have committed a felony. So one of the things locally, we had a long conversation with the prosecutor's office. And, obviously at 12, 13 years old, 14 years old, our interest is not charging these kids with a felony. It's with trying to get them on the straight and narrow. So we have several different avenues that we can pursue short of filing those charges now, which seems to help quite a bit. But again, the hurdle that we have in that investigative field is getting through to the parents why they have to cut that ability off.
Yeah, and I think that's good because a lot of times if you can keep things out of the criminal justice system, I give a lot of credit to Judge Terry Vandervoort.
Oh, absolutely.
Because what they have introduced is a Now there's alternatives to sentencing. In other words, they might have to do so many hours of community service, they might have to clean the parks, they might have to remove graffiti from the bike paths, but they really just kind of introduce that, and it really looks like it's going to be a successful program.
Well, and I think that as with anything, there comes a time that you have to look at the long-term picture of where do we want to be 5 years from now versus where are we today. Back in the day, again, we were the vast majority, 90+% of the people we dealt with who were the predators or the people creating the violations were adults. Now it's flipped, although those predators are still out there and they still search the sites and they still look for victims. Now what we deal with vastly is kids violating with other kids.
And again, the parents need to be paying attention. They need to have some safeguards here.
Well, and we tell parents, and sometimes this is hard to hear, you need to be a parent. You're not their best friend, their best buddy, or their pal. You are their parent. And sometimes that means making really hard and unpopular decisions. Sometimes that means that they may not be the most popular kid because they don't have the latest, greatest cell phone. But again, if you're making that child safe, at some point down the road, that child is going to say to you, Mom, Dad, I really appreciate what you've done for me.
And sadly, there's so many things out there that expose young people, children, to just a lot of things that when we were young, but you just could never access such things nor would you want to.
No, not at all. And interestingly enough, I just 3 weeks ago had a gentleman call me, and he has no computers in his home, but he has a laptop that is a business laptop. And his son was able to get that laptop up into his room and viewed inappropriate sites on that. He then called me and said, I'm really concerned at what he was looking at. Of course, then it puts us in a position, we have to go online to look to determine is it child pornography, because that was the concern.
Sure.
And now, after that's all said and done, now he has to go to his employer and explain why this is on his laptop. So it truly is a terrible web to weave once you start down that path.
Right. Well, we're coming up with just about a minute left, and just briefly, cyberbullying.
Cyberbullying, back in the day when I was in school, bullying was someone would come up and say, give me your peanut butter sandwich. That was pretty much the bullying. Now we're to the point that we have groups that will target a person because maybe they look different, maybe they don't have the nicest clothes, maybe whatever the reason may be, and they use the social media to bombard. One of the absolute worst things that's ever happened to our kids today is Facebook. And the whole concept that these 12, 13-year-olds should have a Facebook account was never designed for that. It was always designed for college-age kids. And right now, that's a huge tool of the people that are using it to bully these other kids.
We could do a whole program, couldn't we?
Sure. Absolutely.
I'd like to have you back. We're not going to make it a year this time,
Okay.
but we're going to have you back. You do a great job and appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule.
Thank you.
Chief Mike Tussey, Chief of the Baltimore Police Department here in Fairfield County. We're just about out of time. Do appreciate you, the viewers and listeners that join us each and every week. Fairfield Christian Academy putting this program together. Our executive producer, Kelly Roberts, behind the scenes. And certainly you, the viewers and listeners. Until next week, same time, same place. God bless, and we'll see you right here next week.
In 1929 in Chicago, a gentleman by the name of Marion Wade, a former minor league baseball player, started the company. It was just a moth-proofing company then. In 1952, it expanded to carpet cleaning and pioneered what is now called outsourcing. And the Sidwells wanted a community that had a lot of churches, had a lot of soccer opportunities where kids love soccer, and a good Parks and Rec department, so they chose Lancaster. And so in 1980, they moved the franchise here in Lancaster to 6th Avenue. But then in 2002, Todd George, current owner, purchased the franchise from them. And in 2004, he bought a building that's on Mulberry Street, and that's where the franchise is located currently. I'm Jay Johnson, General Manager of Service Master Clean by Todd George, where we guarantee if it's not done right the first time, we'll do it again.
Service Master Clean by Todd George, 740-687-1077, 740-687-1077.